I would like to speak about software patents, specifically because there is a lot of misconception around software patents. Now, typically, from a layman perspective, typically people tend to hear that softwares cannot be patented in India, so on and so forth. But that's not the right perception. Software, of course, can be patented. Uh, as long as it is some kind of technological improvement, as long as it does that, software can be patented. But many a times when we end up building software products, the improvements that we bring about is not necessarily in the field of technology. Rather, there are many products which kind of replicate a certain business process in the form of software. For example, if I were to speak of a CRM tool, right? So it's essentially different business logics which we are kind of implementing in the form of software, right? So when that is the case, when a business method such as a CRM tool, or let's say there is a multi-level marketing scheme, and then we have built up a software system that essentially makes it efficient to kind of figure out what should be the incentives that should be distributed to different people in that multi-level scheme, right? So this is essentially business logic, and just we are just making it efficient by implementing the same business logic in the form of a software, which is not patentable. On the other hand, there are several technologies. So likewise, share trading is another example wherein you probably have certain logic as to which shares to buy, which shares to sell, so on and so forth. So even something like that, there could be challenges in getting a patent granted. On the other hand, there could be softwares which essentially provide some kind of a technical solution to a technical problem. So when that is the case, it's a very straightforward case that, yeah, such software can definitely be patented. Now, to give you an example, let's take video conferencing as an example. So we are able to, do this video conferencing, and we might be able to even carry out this video conferencing, even though the bandwidth that might be available, let's say at my end, might be very, very low. But let's say Zoom has a tool, the desktop tool, and then they have a tool on the server, so on and so forth, which is probably able to compress data and then decompress data, so on and so forth, which essentially allows us to carry out this conversation without much glitches, even at lower bandwidth, right? So this is a technical solution. Something like that can certainly be patented. Yet another example, let's take the example of an OCR software, right? So you have a certain tool which probably, let's say, it is trained on certain machine learning data, based upon which it is able to recognize certain characters, which are handwritten characters. Certainly can be patented. So the bottom line here is that how do we present that technology, right? So we need to remember that on the other side, which is the patent office, again, it's another person who is actually reviewing this whole document and trying to judge, yeah, should this software invention that has come to me for examination, should I be considering it as a technical solution to a technical problem, or is it just a business method or some form of a method which is just implemented in the form of software? So that is where many a times the kind of skill kind of comes in terms of how do we actually prepare that patent document, and how do we project that whole technology. So there are multiple ways of projecting the technology. The same technology can be presented and it might look like a business method. At the same time, it can be drafted in a certain way so that it looks more like a technical problem and a technical solution. Now, to give you an example, let's say we're talking about share trading, right? So one could say that, okay, we could draft a patent document that essentially just talks about certain logic as to, how do we decide which shares to buy, which shares to sell, so on and so forth. On the other hand, the same patent document could be written in a slightly different fashion. As an example, we could say that, okay, there is all of this historical data of how certain shares or certain entity values have been changing. And the technical problem is that from this huge amount of historical data that is there, selecting the right kind of historical data is a technical challenge. Now our solution has come up with a way of identifying from thousands and thousands of bytes of historical data, which of those historical data should be analyzed at this point in time, and using the analysis of that historical data, we kind of derive certain trends, and from those trends we provide certain recommendations, right? So it can be kind of projected as a machine learning model to provide recommendation based on historical data, right? As compared to, let's say, a system for shared trading. So it really depends on how you are drafting that patent document. And that has a huge impact on how the patent office kind of perceives this patent document. Whether it perceives as a software that cannot be patented, or whether it perceives as a software that can be patented. Just to give you an example, we have patents granted on software inventions that happens like almost on a weekly basis. I've just put down a few examples just to get a more realistic insight as to, what kind of softwares are actually recognized as something patentable. So the first example here is that a system and method for virtual agents to help customers and business. So here we are essentially patented a virtual agent that kind of sits on your mobile phone, pretty much like your Siri, but it has certain functionalities wherein it takes a user input, and based on that user input, it carries out certain actions on, let's say, a mobile app, and ends up giving you a result, wherein in the absence of this virtual agent, the user would have to carry out multiple steps to actually reach to that end result. So something like that, we have gotten it patented. The second example, system and method for improving recognition of characters. So this is a typical OCR system, again, a software system, patented. System for managing data. So this invention was all about how do we actually compress data and then encrypt and decrypt data, right? So something like that, patented. So in these examples, the last two examples were a very, very clear-cut case, right? The OCR and the data compression, so on and so forth. It's very, very clear that it is a technical solution to a technical problem. Whereas the first one, it could go either ways. So the challenge over there was to how do you actually draft this patent document so that it is inclined in such a way that it appears more like a technical solution. And that is the expertise that one kind of builds up with practice.